opportunities in pay TV. And it really gets down to, can you come up with ideas that deliver real value to the customer across the food chain? And this really means not only the pay TV operator, but the OEM and the end consumer. All of those are critical constituencies when you're trying to develop a product and get it deployed within the pay TV industry. You need to solve a critical problem, and you need to have an understanding of the process of taking a company from initial concept through the supply chain and also through the sales cycle of the pay TV industry, which is a pretty long sales cycle. I think as I've done Quest Fusion, that's my consulting company, over the last year, I've met with dozens of startups with some without great ideas, some with fantastic ideas. Some of the ideas may not be appropriate for the pay TV industry, but others certainly have applications within pay TV. I think the challenge is, even with those companies, they don't have a good understanding of what it takes to actually navigate through, and get business in pay TV.
Yeah, I agree. The sales cycle is really complicated. So why don't we talk about what are the challenges you see in the sales cycle, other than the length, which everybody knows is long?
Yeah, I mean, the pay TV industry is, in order to penetrate it, it's a complex multi-year process, and it's far from linear. I think that you also have to be aware of the landing zones you're trying to hit. So as an example, and as a semiconductor chip company like Entropic, getting MoCA deployed required us initially to demonstrate proof of concept at a laboratory level, then at a small deployment level. We had to do field trials on our own to prove out the technology, and then work with some of the key ecosystem partners, the OEMs, that eventually also became investors in Entropic, as did some of the pay TV operators, to really work closely with them in a collaborative way. One of the biggest ways we did that was establishing an industry alliance called MoCA, where we took our technology and agreed to make that an industry standard in order to get widespread traction for the product.
That's really smart. Yeah, so getting traction is important, and you mentioned field trials. They're a critical milestone, but they're not the end goal. So many technology companies I run into, they think they get a field trial, they're done. They're not done.
No, it's really the beginning.
Yeah, and there's lots of hurdles that you have to go to, and strategic partnerships are near and dear to my heart. It's what I really focus on right now, and I gotta believe that strategic partnerships, like the alliance that you set up. Can you talk about strategic alliances, and really, what is the role that they play in the pay TV ecosystem?
Well, strategic partners are critical in pay TV because it's an industry that's been around a long time, and as a new player or a new entrant to the market, there's a high degree of skepticism around anybody coming in that they don't have a decades-long relationship with. So building relationships with key partners, as an example, Motorola was one of our key partners working in Entropic. They were one of the early adopters of MoCA, and we would jointly pursue business, us as the technology supplier and them as the set-top box supplier within the industry. And those were like what I would call business partnerships, working with the technology arms and the business parts of those companies. We also had strategic partnerships on the investor side. So trying to align interests between the companies that we were selling products to and the financial success on a small scale, but still there was alignment of interest as we had strategic partners come in as strategic investors. That also allowed them to have an inside seat at the board. They weren't board members, but they were board observers. So they were able to get a better understanding. And through that process, you build relationships and you build trust. And that's really the key thing about these partnerships is you have somebody that's then an ally that has this decades-long relationship, and while you're building the relationship with the customer yourself.
Yeah, it's all about leverage. Strategic partnerships are all about leverage. And like you said, there you're leveraging credibility.
Yeah,
because it's hard for startups to have credibility. So now I want to ask you about something that I've personally seen happen with my kids, and it's happening now with me, which is cord cutting. So when I actually used the phrase cord cutting with my kids, they actually said, "What do you mean cut the cord?" And I said, "Blah blah blah." And I told them, "Well, for those of you who don't know, cord cutting is when you have pay TV or cable TV service and you quote cut the cord. You don't really cut the cord because you still have your cable modem or your FiOS. So you've got the internet, but then everything you're consuming media-wise is coming in over the top." And I said to my kids, blah blah blah, "You're cord cutters," and they said, "Dad, we never had the cord." Interesting.
Yeah.
So they don't actually even think of themselves as pay TV or cable TV consumers. They think of themselves as high-speed internet consumers.
Yeah.
So talk about that and talk about where the growth is now going to come, given, if you think about it, that could be a death knell for the industry. So where is the growth?
Yeah, well, if you look at, the overall pay TV industry, with the incumbents, the cable MSOs, the satellite companies, and now the telcos, it's a mature industry at the top level.
Yeah.
So in fact, the only growth that's really occurred in those companies has been through mergers and acquisitions and through deployment of new services.
That's a sign of maturity.
Yeah, actual pay TV subscriptions have been on the decline in the U.S. over the last several years at a slow rate, but now you're starting to see a little bit more acceleration there because of the generational issue that you're talking about, Mark. So I think that there are opportunities for growth, and there's opportunities for growth for innovative technologies and innovative startups. But the game with the large pay TV operators is really no longer about subscriber growth. It's about halting churn. Churn is when a subscriber moves from one operator to another operator, or moves from one operator to no service at all for pay TV, and they're just using Netflix. And it's a game about share of wallet. So how much revenue am I getting per subscriber, and can I come up with innovative services that can increase the amount of dollars that I'm getting from the consumer. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for pay TV. It could be for high-speed broadband. It could be for telephony. It could be for home security. A lot of different opportunities there.
Yeah, so it sounds like the people that are listening today, they really need to almost put a microscope on it and look at where is it that the operators, where are they going, because they have to survive. If they want to survive, it isn't going to be through growth. I mean, the acquisitions are pretty much done. So what you're saying is pay attention to where they're going, like the home security. Why are they going there? Well, because it uses the backbone, it uses the network, and it's just an additional kind of content, additional kind of service. So to me, when I listen to you, it sounds like you've got a lot of defensive actions going on. And there's nothing wrong with playing defense. When the cable operators and the telcos play defense, that's an opportunity for our listeners to say, how can I help them play defense? Like the example where you help reduce the cost of installation. That's a defensive play. Right? Yeah. And then also, like with your home security example, that's playing offense, right? But here's the thing, and this is the one that bothers me the most, is you got these big mature companies that aren't growing, and yet it's really hard for them to innovate. And on the other hand, you've got these little tiny startups, and most of them aren't as successful as Entropic. They're kind of in that middle. They're doing something really valuable, but they can't get the attention. So here's my $10,000 question. Isn't there a way to get these guys together? Isn't there a way to match them up? Is there like forced speed dating where we can get the big guys to listen to the little guys?
Yeah,
am I crazy?
No, I think that there's definitely a bridge that you can cross there, but it gets back to, again, understanding the ecosystem. And if you look at big companies versus small companies, I mean, there's two things I like that are little stories around that. One is, in a small company, you have one person doing 5 jobs. In a big company, you have 5 people doing 1 job.
So true.
I think the other thing is, in a startup, you have very little process. You might have some amount of process, but an engineer is going to be saying, why do I need to document this? I'm documenting it for myself. So just throw the documentation over their shoulder. Whereas big companies get such large bureaucratic processes because they're designed to make sure some bonehead doesn't make a decision that tanks the company.
Right.
So
it's protective.
It's protective. It's defensive. So it's one of those things where that's part of the ecosystem, part of dealing with mature companies. They do want to innovate. They have a desire to innovate, but it's very difficult for them. One of the processes that exists there is this kind of push-pull relationship between the technology arm, the CTO's office of a pay TV operator, and then the finance and operations portions of those organizations that basically want to run them like a bank.
Yeah.
You know, this is all about cash flow, and it's about maximizing
ARPU.
cash flow, which means I don't spend much
Yeah.
money on R&D,
Yeah.
I don't spend
Yeah.
much money on CapEx. And at the end of the day, you have to do both. You know, in order to survive, you have to
Yeah.
both eat and breathe.
Yeah.
You know, if you stop either one of them, you know, it's not going to work,
Yeah.
and that's a delicate balance you have to navigate through.
Yeah. So now here's another thing we touched on a few minutes ago, but this is a really key point that I think it would really help our listeners. It's all about value. When you have a startup, you got to figure out, and you mentioned it, you have to really think deeply and get a lot of vetting about, is there value here? But here's the key, especially for a telco, any kind of telco, you're providing value. You have to provide something that is ultimately a value to the consumer. Otherwise, money doesn't flow upstream. But I would say there's probably more opportunities that provide value internally to the telco, to the pay TV operator. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a challenge that a lot of startups have, a lot of entrepreneurs have, is they think, okay, I've got this awesome solution that's going to appeal to the consumer, and they might actually be right, this is something the consumer would really like, but it's extremely difficult to reach the consumer.
Because you can't get to them.
Without a channel.
They're not your customer.
Exactly.
They're somebody else's customer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to find ways where you identify key pain points for the pay TV operators and other people in the food chain, and that also appeal to the consumer. If you're able to do that, then you have a chance.
Yeah.
It's no guarantee, but and I think the big ones in the pay TV industry is, how can I lower their cost of delivering service? How can I increase their revenue per subscriber? How can I help them grow market share? Maybe not overall market share in pay TV service, but in other areas. How can I increase average revenue per subscriber? All of those things are critical. And then you have to understand the language that they speak. This is something where a lot of very strong technologists really struggle that are entrepreneurs, because they don't know, they may have a brilliant idea, but it gets lost in translation. So you have to be able to understand the language that the operator speaks and be able to communicate the idea in such a way that they can actually understand it.
Yeah. Now there's another piece though. If you think about Walmart, Walmart actually is just a way for other people to get their products and now services to the market.
Yes.
So aren't the operators kind of the same thing? Aren't they sort of controlling the shelf space?
Yeah, they're a channel to the consumer.
They own the consumer.
They
and
do
control the consumer.
In a great regard, they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the biggest opportunity is.
Right.
And there's huge value in incumbency.
Right.
You know, once you're already in the home,
Yeah.
which the pay TV operator is,
Right.
there's huge value in being there.
Yeah.
You have brand recognition, sometimes not always the greatest relationship or
Yeah.
reputation with customers, but most customers, most consumers continue to use some form of pay TV service. Even if you're using Netflix, that's still a pay TV service. It's just not a traditional one.
Yeah, and you're using that high-speed internet.
You're using the high-speed broadband.
Right. So let me tie a little bow on it, and then we'll go to the next part of the questions I want to ask you. So the tying a bow around it says that sort of the epiphany is, don't be naive and think that you can get directly to the consumer. That's a multi-hundred million, if not billion-dollar game. So that means you've got to go through them, the pay TV operators, which means you have to treat them like a customer. And you have to think about their pain points. So that just kind of and use the ecosystem to get to the right people, because you can't just knock on the door, hi, I'm here.
Yeah.
You got to use the ecosystem and weave your way in, like you said, to the CTO's office, which is a great way to go.
You know, there is this, you know, there is a way to get directly to the consumer, and it's about the internet.
Yeah.
But even there, establishing brand recognition and how do you get something to go viral versus using established channels is really, really difficult.
Yeah, I agree.